Conversations with the Mind podcast, where we explore consciousness through conversations with interesting people. Our mission is to engage the collective mind piece by piece to bring greater clarity of mind to our listeners locally and across the planet, and to contribute to broaden the shared experiential knowledge and wisdom of existence.
All right, folks, welcome back to Conversations with the Mind. I'm your host, Shane LeMaster, and we're here for episode number 77 with a good friend, Colby Kelly. How are you?
I'm all right, Shane. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. It's good to see you. Number one, because I haven't seen you for a long time. Period. Most of the time I'd see you in the gym. But, just amidst this whole pandemic thing and the quarantine and all that stuff, it's always good to see a friendly face, someone that brings a smile to my day.
Yeah, I miss the gym a lot. I got a bad back, and now I wiped out on my scooter, busted my ass too, so now my hips are I'm having to get those back in place. Well, not in place, but in working shape. But yeah, I wish I could go back to the gym. I miss it.
So what happened to your back anyway? I don't think I got the whole story.
I don't know. I've been seeing every specialist that I can and everything, and I've had something like 12 MRIs, and I've had CTs and X-rays, and they can't find anything that's pinpointing it, and tried all kinds of injections and things like that, and physical therapy, and nothing's really working.
What does it feel like? Where's it located?
It's I always say it feels like a Nike swoosh, like that, because I can literally trace the pain, but it's starts in the center of my back and then goes across to my right side. Yeah.
Interesting. I've been getting a lot into recently, looking into shamanic worldviews and different perspectives from different cultures on how the body holds injury or how it holds trauma, or how you can clear some of those things. And I mean, for me, for the longest time, I had all these serious knee injuries and things, and I was kind of stuck with Western medicine. That, in my mind, that was the best answer. And oftentimes Western medicine isn't the right tool, right? They don't, in your case, they tried everything. They don't know what it is. And I hear this all the time. And then I hear about these people that go to a spiritual healer or an energy healer or something, and they start to work on this whole other level of the human being, beyond the physical, but free up this stuff that's stuck, that Western science can't figure out. But for a lot of people, that stuff works.
Yeah. I just had a crazy thought about Western medicine, okay?
Do it.
So I don't mean to take this, I gotta take us kind of in a dark turn here, but it's kind of it is kind of Western in that it has to be an extreme, It's not people like it when you have to prove something in the Western scientific method. It's it is or it isn't, there's no kind of gray area. So this is a good way of taking it to the polar extreme in that Western way, with the mind over matter type of the power of the mind thought. Have you heard about the Syrian refugees that are just going to sleep and they fall asleep and then they just die? They just don't wake up again. They're just kind of choosing to die. And they've actually proven now that you can just choose to die. Eventually you give up and your body just quits on you.
I haven't heard that.
Yeah, it was just a sad story. But it's and then they compared it to concentration camp victims, and they said that they would reach this point when you've given up the will to live and you die. And they said that everybody would carry one cigarette with them, and at least one cigarette, because cigarettes were super valuable to trade between concentration camp prisoners. And they said that eventually they said people would just sit down and just stay there for an extended period of time, and then they would when they see them smoking their cigarette, they said that's his last cigarette or her last cigarette, and then they would just sit there and die. That was just, they gave up. I'm I said, that's kind of like the extreme you take it to be like, now you can prove that the mind really does control the body.
Well, yeah, that's a great case study of that exactly. My first MMA coach said something to me way back in the day, and it just stuck with me. And I've tooled it over in my mind for many years and tried to, it has different iterations and different meanings. But he said, "Choose your death," and he just left it at that. And I'm like, what the? That just hit me like a ton of bricks, So first I was like, okay, choose my death. So I want to go out like doing my favorite thing, or like doing something really extreme, jumping out of a plane, something like that. Like that's. So my ego was like in it a lot, right? Like I wanted to go out and have my epitaph read something like he did a triple gainer off of a cliff or something and missed.
Dude, with an exclamation point.
Right. So that's where my immature 20-something-year-old mind took it. And then over the years, it's taken so many different shapes, that phrase, choose your death, to now, like, and you're bringing this in, right? Like these people are making a conscious choice to cease all function, right? To be like, the other side is better than this, or, I can't take what's right in front of me in this reality anymore, so I'm going to make a choice to have that happen. I've read of monks doing that since I found out about that. But for me now, that phrase, like choose your own death, just means like I want to go out surrounded by love. I want to go out without any regrets, things like that. What does that mean to you? Like, this whole story about the Syrian refugees and concentration camp, and just learning that knowledge, right? That you get to choose your own death sometimes
Yeah.
accidental, but if you do get to choose your own death, like that's a lot of agency. That's a lot of power over a really intense experience that we're going to go through.
Yeah.
How do you take that move forward with that information?
Well, that's a hell of a question, Shane. I mean, I guess like I guess I always had like that like a romanticized kind of idea of it, like a heroic death or something like that.
Right.
And I think that what I'm learning a lot too is like the older I get, the more like the curtain is pulled back, and I'm learning that like everything is kind of a lie, and like I romanticize like the Rohirrim at the end of Lord of the Rings, like dying and like charging into the forces of Mordor. But like the more I'm learning that everything's kind of bullshit, like there's not going to really be like this like great war that I'm going to be able to like go and die heroically, and like it's probably going to be like based on like somebody's trying to make a shitload of money, or like bunch of bullshit. And so it's kind of like now I got to figure out like how do you like die of old age and heroically? Like what do you gotta do to be like, damn, he was or at least not even that they like people talk about you, just like think about you in that way. But like you also like you lived a full life and you were a kind person.
Yeah, totally. I think it's difficult. Well, I think we have to kind of change the way we think about the word hero too. Like you're bringing up these, these metaphors that we see on movies and things like that, of like heroes that, some of them truly lived and some of them are fantasy, but we identify with like that feeling, and it may not be possible for some of us to have that kind of heroic death, but there's other ways of being a hero, right? So I imagine like, yeah, I'm hopefully gonna die a really old man. My goal now is to reach at least 100. Anything after that is a bonus, but that's my goal. So if I can be on my deathbed as an old man and just know that I contributed and I gave back to this sort of reality construct that we live in, that I gave more than I took from it. That I had kids, or I had grandkids, or I shared parts of myself or of the work that I'm doing, and I left something better than when I found it. So to me, that's what feels like that's a hero's death for the common man.
Yeah. I would say for me personally, because like all I want to do is make movies, right? Like that's like really the only job I want. And so like I would like to write and all this stuff, and like suppose for me it'd be like if I just entertained people for a while, you know what I mean? And like I'm remembered in that way, I'm cool with that. Even if they just made them feel better for a little while,
Mm-hmm.
Made them forget about their problems for 90 minutes.
Right. Well, that's that change. Like Steven Spielberg has brought so much joy to people's hearts that's rippled out into lots of many other things and other inspiration for other projects. So,
Yeah.
I think the concept of the modern hero is much different than what ancient heroism was. But we still sort of have this archetype that we're trying to strive for, the old school hero, which is probably partially why I got into martial arts. I was
Yeah.
I was drawn into those movies back in the day, like, yeah, I want to be like a fucking samurai warrior, but they don't exist these days.
No.
I wish.
My whole mentality was like, if like my Luke Skywalker moment comes, I want to be ready. And so like I need to know how to fight. I need to know how to. I took CPR at Front Range. I know CPR and first aid, because you never know like when's it gonna come. But now I'm realizing that it's a process. It takes you gotta spread it out.
Here's another thing that might twist your mind too about this whole simulation thing that we live in. So I've noticed that once you acquire a skill, the opportunity to use that skill presents itself more frequently, right? So I never really had to deal with many emergencies before I got my first responder training, and then since then, like I've been present for all sorts of emergencies. My wife says the same thing. Like she has witnessed like 3 or 4 car wrecks in the last couple years, just right outside of our houses that we've lived in, and always been present on the scene to like be the person helping, because no one else on the scene is known. They just have their phones out and they're like, should we call someone? And she's just like giving orders and doing what the first aid training does. But without that training, I don't know if she'd have those opportunities, if we'd have those opportunities. It's kind of crazy how that happens, huh?
Yeah, like it's like that's what I'm talking about when I was talking earlier about why I said that I'm starting to question everything that made me a skeptic and an atheist and all that stuff. Is like sometimes it seems like things are just willed into existence, or like things are just willed into happening. Like you said, like it's same with learning how to fight. And it's funny that you said it, like, because everybody like panics when they like see a car accident and Callie's like calm. And I think like that's kind of the benefit of learning both those things too, is like the skill I had from learning how to fight was, as I didn't go into fight or flight mode. Like I was like, I'm totally calm here. I'm like, I don't gotta fight. Don't feel like I have to prove myself. I'm not worried this guy's gonna hurt me. Like I'm just gonna be cool about this, But hardly ever and I mean, I would have noticed too, because I was like worried about getting into like confrontations or fights or something like out in public. And so like I would like try to be like looking for it in a way, But then like after learning how to fight, like then there's like opportunities, I guess you'd say, like started to present themselves. Like all of a sudden it was like people like seemed to be more confrontational with me, and like more like willing to challenge me for like no like reason. But again, like the skill was that like I knew how like to do it. Like I knew how to throw a punch then. I just didn't need to. Like I didn't feel a compulsion to. It was just like I was like, if things go bad, yeah, I'll throw, like if I got to, I'll throw a punch. But like I don't want to. Like I'm like, I know somebody's gonna step in here and break it up. I don't need to escalate it.
Yeah.
And like I would think to myself, like I've taken punches from much better men than this guy. So like if he throws a punch, I can probably handle it. You know what I mean? So I'm just kind of like, this is good. Everything's gonna be all right. We're gonna be fine. Everybody calm down.
Yeah, I noticed that too in my own martial arts, and it never failed. It's, I don't even drink, but whenever I go out to the bar scene, like for a friend's birthday or something, almost always some drunk guy will start some shit with me for no reason, just because I look a certain way. And you're right, like there's like this calmness that comes over me, like this anticipation, like I'm super ready, and I can feel like all the muscles like becoming ready for anything. But at the same time, there's like this inner calm of like yeah, just understanding yourself in the situation, and understanding uh yeah, really having that understanding of what you're capable of.
Yeah.
Another thing martial arts taught me too, that in those situations you really don't know who you're going up against.
No.
And that's where like this old samurai mentality still comes over me, is it's still like the old west. And even more so these days with you know just the growth of jiu-jitsu and martial arts in the last 10 years. Like there's so many blue belts and purple belts out there. You can meet a handful of them any given night, or maybe they have 6 months experience, or maybe they have a knife in their pocket, or maybe they have a whole gang of friends behind them, right? So martial arts teaches you too, like what you're capable of, but you also know what you're not capable of. You're not capable of taking on 20 people like Steven Seagal back in the day, but
Yeah.
it's still like the Wild West, and it gives you an appreciation and a respect for what you're capable of doing to somebody else.
Yeah.
And that's why I don't think I was ever super successful in MMA, was because I don't like the feeling that comes over me from doing harm to somebody. Like I know I've done harm to people, and I know what's possible, but doing it afterwards, I feel terrible, even if I didn't like the person, and that's
Yeah.
anguish I don't want to have to carry.
Yeah, and I think like it reminds me of like all those people that like all the fighters in the UFC and stuff when they like the Diaz's, like when they win and they like go over and like raise the other guy's hand, all stuff. I think it's because that's their way of reconciling it. Is they're like, I had to do that, but like everybody should still love this guy, and I'm sorry I had to hurt you, and like he's cool. That's way of like reconciling that they physically harm somebody.
Yeah, you don't get that chance on the street.
No. And like also do you think to yourself, like when you're like rolling, you're like you're like, this is like cool and I'm good at this, but like that's because that guy's like trying to like poke me in the eye or like bite my finger, or, like grab my dong and try to like pull it off. Like it's we're being gentlemen here. Like this, people don't fight like gentlemen in the streets.
Sure. I like to, that's part of my style as a coach at Z's, is that I try and incorporate some of that stuff sometimes, where I'll be rolling with the lower belts, and instead of just holding them in a position because maybe they just don't want to move, they feel like if they move, they're going to find a worse position to be in.
Yeah.
But I'll make a motion to like swipe at their eye, or to like break a finger, or something small, and just be like, hey, that this is still available too, so make sure that you're guarding your head or guarding your face or something like that. I like to mix that in, because if you can get too stuck in the sport aspect of jiu-jitsu, instead of knowing what it's capable of and what its limitations are too, what you have to look out for. Like jiu-jitsu with striking is so much different than just sport jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. Well, it's like look at all the people that didn't transition. It like I figured it'd be like murderers in the UFC, like, or just in MMA, like. Oh damn! Now I feel terrible. I'm forgetting his name. He's like he's the greatest grappler ever. Oh my god, I'm so embarrassed. Marcelo Garcia.
Okay.
He did not transition well, and he's like the baddest motherfucker ever, you know. So it was like, and he literally, it was because he went for a takedown, got punched, and it was a cut. You know, and like they had to stop it because of a cut because he's not used to getting punched at all.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting. Back in the day, the old Gracie films and stuff, like there would be striking for sure allowed, or the old Valley Tudo or something. But then there was like this departure away from that and more just like into the purity of just the grappling art minus the striking. And now, you know, you see the reemergence definitely with MMA, but even with like Eddie Bravo's promotion for combat jiu-jitsu with their open hand slapping. Have you ever seen that?
No, well, I mean, I didn't see the open hand slapping. I thought, didn't he do one for a while where you like they started off standing up and you couldn't throw strikes until you were like engaged in grappling?
Yeah, I think that might be it. He called it
They
like
were punching each other.
Yeah, combat grappling, and it's palm strikes are allowed, but some people have gotten knocked out, and your game totally changes when you're getting hit. You know what I mean? It's like that's like, and I find so many metaphors and crossovers between jiu-jitsu and life. Like same thing with life. Like everything's fine and dandy until you start getting hit in the face by something you didn't expect, right? And then your whole game changes. But if you don't adapt to that new change, right? With COVID, this thing hit us all like a smack in the face. We were going along on our merry way, ignorant, and then slap. And now we're like, oh shit, how do I regain guard on my life so that I can start, you know, taking advantage of positions?
Damn, that's a really good point. Yeah, because it's like it's one thing to have the skill set. It's just like, but when you got to actually like put it into what like use, it's a whole nother story. Like we all like said we had like these beliefs and these hobbies and this like we would do this and we would do that, but now like the chips are down. Like now it's time to feel like how are you actually going to hold up in this, and like how are you going to treat other people, and weird time to be alive.
Yeah. What are you seeing from your perspective of consciousness and seeing this whole COVID pandemic and people go crazy over toilet paper and all these other things happen in society? What is your take on it so far?
Terrifying. I mean, it's literally just like it feels so like hopeless too, because it's like what is it going to take for like some people? I just don't think they're interested in changing their mind at all. Like they've got a set of beliefs and they're going to stick to it, but it's just like I saw it's like in some places these store owners are opening up their stores and saying you're not allowed to wear a mask in there. And I'm just like, people are literally dying by the thousands. Like, what do we got to do to like prove the point? You know what I mean? It's like what counts as evidence, because there's a lot of it, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, it's I don't know what to do about it, you know? It's discouraging.
It's like this it's like this battle sort of between, you know, herd mentality, save and protect the herd, but also this other side that's just like people don't, especially in this country, people don't want to be told what to do either way. You know, we don't want anybody higher up, you know, government or otherwise, telling us what to do. It should be the other way around, where we're telling the government what to do. And so when these things come down and say, you know, you can't go here, you know, non-essential jobs, and you got to wear a mask, and people don't like that, and people don't like it the other way too. When you say you can't wear a mask in here, you know, people want to have choice, and I think that's that balance that we're trying to figure out. Is like, how do we allow people the choice to put themselves at risk or at danger if they want to, and go to work if they want to, but also how do we not force people to go to work if they are terrified, or how do we accommodate everybody? And I just don't see an easy solution.
Do you think that this is people, like this is them seizing like the like a certain kind of like agency they've been waiting for a long time? Like they've been always wanting to defend their freedom, but like haven't really had the cause yet. And now that they've got something, even though it's something that like in the grand scheme of things isn't really infringing on any freedom, but like this is their first time to be like, now this is an affront to my freedom. Now it's time for me to fight back. And it's kind of misguided maybe.
Well, I definitely think that this event has been a catalyst for some people to engage that, but there's always something going on, some kind of infringement, trying to get past, infringement on freedom through a bill, trying to get passed through Congress or whatever. There's always something going on that people will use as that triggering event, sort of rally themselves into action. But this is certainly a big one.
Yeah.
I think I had those sort of proclivities before this even happened, and just seeing some of the craziness around, just some of the hoarding behaviors, some of the even when I go out today, like people are still like really angry and driving freaking crazy on the road, and like what are you people doing? So that a lot of people out there are causing like this. So I'm not so afraid of the pandemic as I'm afraid of people's responses to it, right? And it's sort of reinforcing my proclivities for personal freedom. Like I want to be able to protect my family if the nutball neighbor tries to break into my house for my toilet paper. I want to be able to have the freedom to protect myself and grow my own gardens. I don't want people telling me what I can and cannot do in my own space. All these things.
I just had an interesting thought that when you were saying that you want to be able to protect your family, is like straight up, I don't trust the police,
No, me neither.
But like if things went, necessarily went south, just to the point where they're martial law, and like I would be cool with you like being my police officer, you know what I mean? But like so maybe that's I don't know.
So
just need to divide it up a little bit more.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean.
Like somebody I know, I know your intentions are good. I know you're not like corrupt.
Sure.
I don't like a person that goes and gets a job as like a police officer. I sometimes worry about, especially because I've met people that were like, I'm going to join the police academy, and I'm like, you are the biggest dick I've ever met. Like you are a straight up bully, and you're going to join the police force, huh?
Either that, or like they try and hold a conversation with you, and it is the dumbest conversation of your life, and you're like, really? You're going to be a police officer? Okay. So I hear you there. Like I don't trust the police as an organization. I know there's good apples and bad apples in there. But it's not my job to sort through them and pick and choose which ones are good or not. So my philosophy is like, it's not the police's job to protect me, because I can protect myself. I don't need the police to protect me. I can do that myself. And your idea, like protecting each other on a community level, right? Like protecting the people that you're invested in, your neighbors, your family, your friends. Like that's the kind of protection that we need, not like this, I don't know, this hierarchical department above us, I guess. Like their original police were originally to protect and serve, right? Like in the 20s and 30s, I don't even know if they carried guns. There's these old signs from back in the day. You can find it like antique shops of police officers like giving lollipops to kids and like getting down on their level and like playing in the community. And that was what I saw or imagined a police officer was growing up, but that's not what it is today. Like, it's the
They
exact
have like, I was just thinking about this the other day. They have like 7 weapons on their belt.
really.
If they think about it, like they got a baton,
Hmm.
they've got a gun, they've got a taser, they've got a knife. What else they got? They got the telescopic batons. They got pepper spray. I lost count, but that's a shitload.
Handcuffs. Use a hand.
Handcuffs, and they wear their armor on the outside too. So it's like, not only can I kill you, but you can't kill me, like all the time. Like that's the message I see from it, at least.
Yeah, definitely.
And then it doesn't seem a lot surprising that they would like shoot lots and lots of unarmed people.
They've done it before.
Yeah.
I just saw this video the other day of this cop pulled over this white kid on the side of the road and asked him to get out, and he was. And I think the kid like held his arm behind his back, which could be a sign of like, yeah, he's going for a gun. But that's a tough decision for the police officer to make. But he put him down, and the kid didn't have a weapon. He was unarmed. So I mean, it's crazy shit. I know it's terrible. I don't know. I don't want to be the person in those situations, but also, I don't think maybe they're not getting enough training.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't want to sit here and criticize the police too much, because there's a lot of police out there that do a lot of great service to the community, and it's just unfortunate that they don't get as much publicity as the others.
Yeah. This is what I think was a huge part of it, because I used to, I don't know, just curious about guns and stuff, and like would like look at those like gun training videos and stuff. And I think what happened is like becoming like the weapons expert, this thing like became like a competitive market, and so people would always like try to like level up, like one up the other gun trainers. And so like to become the best one basically made it seem like guns were the most dangerous thing on planet Earth, and you can be killed within like seconds of somebody being pulling a gun on you. And so it just like got in everybody's mind, like, don't even hesitate. If you've got a gun, kill them, because you don't want them to kill you. But did you see that guy in Toronto that drove a van or a truck through like the crowd? Do you remember that?
I think I heard about it.
And the Canadian cop, I think he had his gun, but he wasn't pointing it at, or maybe he was holding it on the guy, but the guy kept trying to do like suicide by cop. He made it look like he had a gun, but he didn't actually have a gun. I wish they even had like an airsoft gun or something like that. But the Canadian officer just kept like refusing to shoot him and tell him to put his gun down. And it worked. Like eventually he arrested the guy.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think you can, I don't know.
They do things differently in Canada.
Yeah, that's true.
Here in the U.S., yeah, there's different like mindsets with firearms, and here it seems like maybe it's a shift in just the overall mindset of like shoot first and ask questions later. Protect yourself at all costs, because you're, as a police officer, you're a greater good to the community alive than dead, or whatever. I don't know. I grew up with firearms. I've been shooting since I was, 3 or 4 years old. I was on a competitive shooting team in high school, at military school, all sorts of shooting and courses and long range courses and all sorts of things. So I don't know. It's really hard for me not to have like respect for firearms, and not to like, just like martial arts. Like I know what they're capable of.
Yeah.
I don't, I don't ever want to pull a gun unless I intend to use it,
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people who haven't grown up with guns are afraid of them because, I don't know, for a lot of reasons. Underexposure, not knowing how to operate or clean, or safety precautions. But it's scary for me to think that people who don't have a respect for it are also carrying weapons out there.
Yeah. Yeah, like I think that's what's scary about them to me, because it's like I don't know. I always think about it kind of like just because I like medieval stuff and knights and all that stuff. I always think about it in like the terms of a sword, like carrying a sword. And like if you, I guess when back then, if you saw somebody carrying a sword, you at least, I mean, pretty good chance you're like they're trained, they know how to use it. I don't got to worry about like them just like going off willy nilly, slicing everybody up, you know. But now it's like anybody, and like you don't have like a sword. You like you at least be like, well, if they're no good with the sword, I can probably get away. You know, I can run away from them. But like
Yeah,
the gun,
yeah,
it's kind of like everybody's a pretty decent shot. You know, like if you like just aim in the general direction, you got a pretty good chance. You know.
yeah, yeah, man. I don't know. Part of me believes in past lives and things like this, and I have a real affinity for certain time periods, and the one I feel most close to is samurai culture, and trained warriors carrying around their weapons, and um, common folk wouldn't carry around weapons, you know.
No.
Yeah, and if you were a poser and you were not trained, you were probably called out on it and decapitated pretty quickly, you know.
Yeah.
You might get in a couple lucky shots, but I don't know. And that's an interesting thing too about old warrior cultures and sort of mapping it into modern day life, because like the ninja back in the day began as farmers.
Yeah.
They were farmers using farmers' tools and relying on stealth to overcome their larger, heavier opponents in the samurai. You know,
Yeah.
using farming tools and farming weapons and really mastering those things. So it's interesting how I think, if shit hit the fan and it got way worse, like say this pandemic happened and then like a major volcano in Yellowstone or something like that, or whatever goes off, then we really start to see who's sort of ready for this
Yeah.
and who's not. I don't think anybody's ready, but other people are going to fare better than others. You and I just took a path of being proactive about it and hoping
Yeah.
that we never have to use it, but also enjoying the learning of the skills.
Yeah, and I think like ultimately, like with everything else that's said so far, like the skill will be like that we won't panic, you know?
Right.
We can just then think like, okay, so we're running out of water. We gotta find more water. This is where water's at. Or however it's gonna work in the apocalypse. I don't know.
Yeah, who knows, man.
Yeah.
So what about the martial arts? So for me, the martial arts it's evolved too over the years, and it started out as like this way to keep my active young 5-year-old brain focused and teach me some self-discipline, which I'm sure my mom loved. But I started competing real young, and it was really just about like confidence and defending myself against bullies, right? Bullies on the schoolyard. And as long as I could handle myself physically, then I could lean into like my more academic pursuits, right? Because I don't have to like worry about that piece.
Yeah.
So I think all the way into like my mid 20s, it was all about force and pushing harder than anyone else, and just a really sort of violent, chaotic, aggressive um, attitude that I put into my martial arts. And then there was this big switch when I was forced to, sideline because of injuries, where I had to like rediscover who I was beyond the martial arts. And even though I couldn't practice physically, like parts of what I had learned over those decades had stuck with me, and I got to see that the martial arts bled into like so many other aspects of my life. And now that's sort of how I see it holistically. Like my life is bleeding through and through with martial arts concepts that I've learned over the years. And it's more of a spiritual path for me these days, instead of being aggressive and pushing hard. I mean, I still push hard, but it's about relaxing into the flow more, not forcing anything, but responding in a more reflexive manner to my opponent. So I guess for you too, like your martial arts journey has had its ups and downs.
Yeah.
So what does that look like for you, and like what has been the internal journey like for you too?
Yeah, the first one I noticed is like I had this problem where it's like if something isn't easy for me, like I kind of like panic with it, you know, and just like I don't know, yeah, like if it's not easy or if I'm not instantly good at it, like I would panic. But I never really had anything like MMA in my life up until I started training like at 22, and like I was able to think to myself like, well, yeah, I'm not good at it right now. What was like with every skill now, even like it's like with every skill, I'd just be like, well, yeah, I'm not good at it because I'm a white belt at it. Like I just start like I'm like I don't even got like the black tape on it yet. Like I've literally just started, you know.
That's how you
And it's
use
like if I keep doing it and I keep doing it and keep doing it, well, then eventually I'll be a blue belt. And if I really like it, I'll stick with this, like whatever skill this is, I'll stick with it. And maybe one day I'll be a black belt at it. Like I'll be the world's greatest, like, I don't know, checkers player or whatever. But yeah, and like, and so I'd say recently, like that's kind of what that's changed it, like morphed into, like with time and not being able to trade and all that stuff, is like it's become like I'm starting to realize how much of like what like aspects of the like mind, like the like attitude and mental capacity. I'm not trying to sure what I'm trying to say here, but like how much of that is like exercise and how much of it is a skill. Like positive thinking is a skill that you got to build. Like if you haven't had a like particularly happy life, you're a white belt at like happiness and positivity, and so you got to kind of keep working at it and working at it. And it's like if you don't instantly feel something, like it's like sad. It's the I'm trying to like, you know, I'm trying to say, like it's all like those are skills too. Like I, I mean, like in the way that reading is a skill, you know, like it's ways of thinking are skills too, and you gotta work at those. And if you keep doing it and you keep doing it, eventually you'll progress and you'll get better at it.
I love how you apply the belt system to pretty much every experience everybody has out there, you know.
Yeah.
Like I was thinking like, oh yeah, like I'm a blue belt now, I think, or I'm a blue belt at my relationship with my wife. But I'd say I'm still a white belt at marriage itself.
Yeah.
You know, or you know, yeah, I'm a brown belt in jiu-jitsu, and I'm working also on my brown belt in academia.
Yeah.
You know,
And like
but but I'm a newbie when it comes to gardening, you know. And instead
yeah.
of looking at it and just being like, I'm not good at this, I'm gonna just quit, or I'm gonna move on to something that I'm better at to serve my ego, maybe. No, I'm gonna stick with this because this is something that I want in my life, and the more I cultivate this, it's just gonna take time and patience, you know, to become that black belt level gardener.
Yeah. And I was just thinking about in this way too, that it's like when you get hurt, like when I hurt my knee, like and you can't train anymore, but you were like going hard, like showing up every day at training, and you were getting like you're like basically like you were being a good driller, you know, you were like drilling all the time, you're getting like intense. And then like when you get like when I hurt my knee and you pull yourself back from it and you start to like focus on like the like you just like the mental part of it, and you're like start picturing like, you know, guard passes and like how you're gonna like set up the submission, all stuff. And then you come back like months later, you're like way better because you needed that time away from it to like get like align like your mental progression and your physical progression. And then like once you get those two together and you're like flowing with your jiu-jitsu and you're like, I needed that time off. I think that'll happen too. Like I think and like when you say marriage, I think that's what happens like when people get like divorced and get back together, is like they were like drilling hard with each other their whole lives, And they both got to like the same level, but then it just kind of like they plateaued at marriage. And then they're like, well, I guess we don't love each other anymore. We got to get divorced. And they took that time apart and they're like, oh shit, like I should have been doing this the whole time. And I should have never said that. And I should have been mowing the lawn instead of like doing that. And then you're like, and then she's like, the wife she's thinking about things she should have done. And you get back together and like, wait, are you way better at marriage now? Like I am too. Shit, we should probably get back together.
Yeah. You have to go through those challenges. Almost everybody that I know who's stuck with Jiu-Jitsu or MMA for any amount of time has had a serious injury. Almost nobody I know hasn't. And yeah, I mean, it's like a rite of passage, unfortunately, but it's also, we have great medical technologies these days. So, I mean, worst case scenario, you'll be back in like a year. Mine was extreme. I was out for 5 years on lots of surgeries, but that was at the fault of Western medicine at the time. Yeah. But still, like, I learned this whole new curriculum. Like half of my understanding of jiu-jitsu came from not being on the mats or being forced to replay things over and over in my mind. I actually read a book. It's my favorite book of all time. It's called The Intention Experiment by Lynn McTaggart. And she goes over like all these research studies in all sorts of different fields and talks about the power of the mind. And in one section of the book, she talks about the body's or the mind's ability to heal the body. And there were these studies done where there were individuals who had the same injuries, but were in different control groups. One group was trained in positive visualization for healing. So they were visualizing moving their limb. They were visualizing the cells actually healing the tissues in there, and they got a basic understanding of what the anatomy looked like in there. And the other group didn't have anything. They were just the control group. And they found that the people who were able to engage the mind with those repetitions and with the healing practices healed like exponentially faster than the others, cut down the recovery time significantly, and had fewer re-injuries in the long term. And to me, that just screams that, number one, we can heal ourselves. I think all healing comes from inside, but we can control that a little bit more than we give ourselves credit for. And number two, like, you can get that muscle memory. You can retain a lot of that. You can retain a lot of muscle mass after injury just from the visualization of the action, right? So when you're forced to be on the sidelines, you're visualizing moves and you're visualizing submissions, you are training. Don't think that that's like not training. That's just as important as actually physically doing the movement, right? So I like to tell our athletes at Z's, like, when you're not on, I mean, you only come to the mat for 1 hour and a half a day or 3 hours at the most, right? There's 21 hours left in the day. What are you doing? You should use some of the hours for mental training, review video of yourself, go over it in your mind, do some journaling about jiu-jitsu, or just whatever. But there's other ways to train. And yeah, I really like that. Because you can train jiu-jitsu until you're like 90, right? And your body may not work, but your understanding of it will continue to go.
Yeah. And like I had two things I thought of. First was with taking time off from MMA. Did you know that Conor McGregor, just like at the beginning of his career, he just felt like he wasn't where he wanted to be, and he stepped back for 3 years and then came back?
I had no idea.
Yeah, he just like knew he's like, I'm not where I want to be, and he stepped back and took 3 years and came back and was the baddest ever.
Do you know what he did on those 3 years?
What's that?
Do you know what he did on those 3 years?
I don't know. I don't think so. Well, you know what? I think he said it in the interview, but I can't remember what he said. But yeah, and I agree with the healing and stuff. And like I said, I guess I'm just thinking this is just more evidence if people need it for like the mind's effect on the body is like, and if you like, it's like, it helps to put it in that like, it's like the same kind of athlete terms that we've been using here. But like pretty much, I don't think there's anybody that would disagree that Arnold Schwarzenegger was the best bodybuilder of all time. Like he just looked the best. Like he had the best physicality, best physique. Nobody looked as good as he did, Like I remember, like you've watched Pumping Iron, right?
Yeah.
Like I remember like watching it and stuff before I knew it was all like scripted. But I watched him being like, wait, how like Lou Ferrigno's totally gonna beat him. He's bigger and like it's like, and then you went like, and they like actually started flexing. I was like, oh no, like that's why Arnold won it like 8 times in a row. It's because like he looks real good. But he would always say that like he could tell when people were gonna be good bodybuilders and when they couldn't, because like he says we're just lifting weights. He's like, that guy's never gonna make it. And he said, you have to be inside the muscle. And he said, like, he would literally, like, as he's doing curls, he would be, like, inside his bicep, visualizing, like, every muscle tensing up. I think that's just more like, like I said, like, it's more evidence that it's possible, that it's that the mind has that effect on the body.
Well, and there's studies that support that now. After Arnold figured it out on his own, science also started to back that too. And studies with mindfulness, being able to apply increased levels of mindfulness to weightlifting, and the muscle's ability to expand at greater amounts than just mindlessly lifting weights.
Yeah.
The same thing goes. I went to school for sports psychology, and you probably heard this term thrown around. It certainly was in my program, where they say like, you become an expert at 10,000 repetitions or at 10,000 hours, right? So those studies were largely done on musicians and specific types of musicians, and then just sort of applied generally to everybody. It hasn't actually been tested in most fields, but I mean, as a general rule, that's sort of like the mentality that we need to have to develop I guess the proficiency that we're going for in anything that we're doing, right, is 10,000 hours. So this new thing with mindfulness is interesting, because now that whole phrase has changed recently to become 10,000 intentional repetitions, or 10,000 intentional hours of practice. Because you're right, you can go to the gym and do 10,000 mindless repetitions and think that you're a bodybuilder, but that's not what makes a bodybuilder. What makes a bodybuilder is someone who goes in and does 10,000 repetitions where they're in that moment, every moment. For a martial artist, same thing. You can't just go in there and throw 10,000 kicks on the bag. You have to artfully throw 10,000 kicks on the bag. You have to artfully do 10,000 arm bars before you've perfected that motion,
Yeah. Do you think it's possible that there's just different kinds of people? Like there's the type of people that like just cramming in 10,000 hours of doing something would make them an expert, and then there's the type of people that just need like the mindfulness aspect, but they can get to the same level?
Yeah, I definitely think that natural athleticism exists for sure, and genetics is a factor in there too. So that was part of what made Arnold so great, is his genetics. He was this Austrian build, blonde-haired, blue-eyed guy.
6'2".
Yeah, 6'2", tall, and his proportions were perfect, right? Like they were more perfect in their balance, right? Like Lou Ferrigno might have been bigger, but his balance in the way that his physique looked wasn't the same as Arnold's. So there's going to be certain athletes that are going to be better naturally at certain sports, but and they can be the best in the world if they engage the mindfulness, right? Then they could be like Olympians. But for the average Joe, even with 10,000 hours of mogul skiing, say, I'm not going to be at the same level as someone else who's built for mogul skiing. So it varies so much more than just this 10,000 hours, right? That's just like this sort of it's like this idealistic, like you should just start getting to work and see what happens, like go for the 10,000 hours, and then when you get there, like are you going to be happy with it or not? Probably.
Yeah. Yeah. But again, and I think what the key is to all of it is don't make it like 10,000 or what is it again? 10,000 hours? Is that what we said?
Well, for some things it's 10,000 hours. For some things it's 10,000 repetitions.
Okay. Well, whatever like the 10,000 is don't make them all consecutive.
Yeah.
And like it's important to take a step back and like step away from it for a while, because it's like you need to be able to look into it and then like to be like how do you do it without your body, and you end up thinking I mean outside the box,
Yeah. How about this? Like,
get better at it.
how about you have multiple 10,000 hour projects going on at the same time in your life, so that when you need to take a step back from one, you still have maybe two other self-improvement projects that you're working on,
Yeah.
pour yourself into, and then rotate them in and out. That's one thing I noticed, you know, when my first catastrophic knee injury happened, I was so immersed in martial arts that took up almost my entire identity.
Yeah.
And then when that was gone, I felt empty. I felt lost. I felt sunk. Like, who the hell am I? And then over time, I started to discover, like, oh yeah, I'm so many more things. I'm a student. I'm a brother. I'm all these things. Those things need 10,000 hours as well.
Yeah.
But I wasn't giving them enough time. So then I poured my efforts into those things, and then was able to come back to the martial arts when I did.
Yeah.
So we got to find these like multiple overlapping projects, so that you're right. Don't do it consecutive, but leave space to step away and work on something else.
Yeah. We're gonna be experts at stuff here before long.
Yeah, so you're going to school right now for ethnic studies and women and gender studies, right?
Yeah.
That's certainly a 10,000 hour type pursuit. To get that degree, to study, to
Yeah.
I mean, I know how school is. I'm a student, and even when you're not actively reading or writing or going to class, you're still toiling over these concepts and putting things together, and that's all part of that 10,000 hours that
Yeah.
this, right?
Yeah, now that you say that, that makes a lot of sense. Like it's the 10,000 hours aren't necessarily of one thing. It's like we'll have a reading that we like have to do before class. Then we'll have a class discussion, and then like I have for me personally, just because all the things we talk about are foreign to me, being white and a man. So it's like I got to have that time to process it, and so it's like when I go home and I sit there and like chew on it and think about all this, like all these things that are like making sense and becoming clear, and like things that I thought were true that weren't, and all that stuff. And then when I like go and read another reading, those are all part of the same 10,000 hours. It's just that they're all different aspects of it, and me absorbing it in different ways and experiencing it in different ways too. Yeah, it's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, it's all accumulating towards
Yeah.
some expertise in something, right?
Yeah. I guess maybe that was the problem I had, where I would thought of it as like it was 10,000 hours of like me, like, I don't know, reading essays or whatever, but it's 10,000 hours of it just immersed in the environment, the academic environment.
Sure. I think most listeners out there can probably think of something that they're doing right now that's a 10,000 hour type activity. And I think it's an interesting sort of self-reflection thought experiment to do, to think about if that thing that you're working on came to an end. Doesn't have to be a reason behind it, but say you graduate, right? So your 10,000 hour experience, boom, you hit your mark, it goes away. Now you don't have those things to focus on. So that's that's a very similar sort of crossroads or turning point as like an injury, where you're forced not to do something. So a lot of people kind of get stuck there after graduation or after a big capstone and sort of get lost for a couple years and try and figure out who they are now. Like, what do I do now that this thing happened? And that's another good reason to have like multiple things going on, right? So you graduate, but now now you're on the job market. Now but you're still working on other passions that you're, engaging.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that that might be an example of like cramming in the 10,000 hours. Is like, you went to school and you said to yourself, like, I'm going to become get my business degree or whatever. And so you just like, okay, 4 years, I got to do this many things, and then I'll be a businessman. And so like, they treated school more of like as a chore than there was no mindfulness about it. There was no like, it was, okay, learn this fact, fill in the bubble, move on with my life. It was never like I got to process this. Like, I'm just learning this for the first time. Like, I'm learning about, I don't know, government or civics for the first time. It's not so much just like I got to memorize like what like the Bill of Rights was. It's like how do I apply this? Where have I seen this in life? Like, what is this? Like when I heard that, did I remember something that like before, like when I heard about, democracy when I was a kid, did I understand it then? Do I understand it now? How, like, what's the difference between those two thoughts? Is for them though, it's more just like a democracy is, these 3 facts. I write that on the test and I move on with my life and never think about it again. I think that's why a lot of people think it was a waste of time when, and then there's people in the world that would like kill to have the same education that people treat like it was a waste of time. And like they think they have like filled with useless facts. And when in fact, it's like, you should be grateful that you have all those facts, but there was no mindfulness in it because they thought, I put in my 10,000 hours, I become a business executive.
Right.
Whatever.
Yeah, it's like two different levels, right? One level is surface level facts, and that'll get you through to the, to graduation. It'll get you a job. But there's a deeper level that I'm learning more and more about this in my pedagogy class this last semester. But there's this deeper level of learning that I think you're talking about, where it may incorporate mindfulness, but it's definitely a deeper like mental engagement with the content, right? So you're not just learning facts, but then you start to unfold the facts further and ask yourself, like, what does this fact mean to me? How does it bear on me and my history? How do I think about it now? How did I think about it then? How does it change every day? That's that deeper level of engagement that I think you're referring to. And it's interesting because I personally think like that's on the student to bring that to bring that to their education. The responsibility of the student to engage further than the content that you're given. But these days, it's, what I see on campus with the younger generations are, they're saying that it's the teacher's responsibility to keep them inspired in class. It's the teacher's responsibility to motivate them and to, there are great strategies for teachers to do that. And most of my teachers are great at doing that, but I don't think it's their job to do that,
Yeah. Do you think that there's a, because I think there's like a mindfulness like crisis there, because it's like, I think when people say that to or about teachers is what they're trying to say is more of like, I want you to be mindful of this student and like that they need to be motivated and all that stuff. And like, it's like, because I agree, it's not the teacher's responsibility. Like, their responsibility is to just teach the best they possibly can. Like, that's their only responsibility. But I think people are trying to say like, would you please be mindful of the student and their motivation and their enthusiasm and all those things? But instead, like, I think it's kind of like it's all over the place. I don't know enough about like other cultures, but I think it's kind of like an American thing where it's just kind of like you just tell somebody it's their job and then be like, good luck. You know what I mean? And so they're just saying like, this is your job, when what they mean to say is, would you be mindful of this? It would be more effective if you are mindful of the student.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Yeah, and as hopefully a future teacher myself, and even now when I'm teaching jiu-jitsu classes, I try and get to know the person a little bit better, the student, try and figure out like what works best for them, what instructional style works best for this person. And I'm going around the mat trying to tailor it to everybody's needs. But I'm finding that it's impossible to do that for everybody all the time, right?
Mm.
So I think teachers in our culture, and especially here at CSU, I've had nothing but great teachers here, but they want to learn how to engage the student, on those deeper levels. But I think, they can only do so much.
Yeah.
It needs to be a motivation of the individual learning whatever skill it is to move beyond it, right? Like I'll take jiu-jitsu again for instance. So white belt mentality is you go in, you learn the move. Great, I have this other move in my belt. But as you go deeper and deeper into jiu-jitsu, you learn all these life lessons, right? You learn that the belt is nothing. You learn that the technique only goes so far, and there's other understandings of how to approach life and what you've gained and learned from the struggle of being on the mat. And so I don't know, but it takes the desire of the student to want to discover those deeper aspects. Do you find, I mean, it sounds like you're, in your studies, you have that push to want to, dig deep, not only into the content, but like into your place in those classes, right? You said you're a white male in these ethnic studies, women's studies classes.
Yeah.
That's got to be a super intense self-reflective practice to be in those classes as the representation of the oppressor of most of those groups.
Yeah. No, it's but you know what? Here's something that's really, I have a hard time. It's because there's a lot of the, like I said, the curtain was pulled back, and a lot of things I thought were true turned out to be bullshit. And like when you say like a white man, like that's mostly for like other people. Like I really stopped thinking about myself in that way, because like it's just there's so much attached to it. Like here's something that a lot of people don't know about. Like, all right, if you think about it, it's like people that are white are not the color white, right? Like it's more like a beige, a peach tone, right? And people we call black, their skin isn't black, it's brown, And so it's kind of like, that's weird, right? It's weird we call each other that. The reason we call each other that is because when like the country first started, a black person, like, they said there was like Irish slaves and Native American slaves, they were black. A black person was somebody that you could enslave. Like that was the definition of a black person. But so like you had all these super wealthy slave masters and then you had like slaves, and then you had like the poor people, right? And so like, but they wanted to keep that social division because they were slave owners. They were bad people, right? I mean, these were bad people. And they wanted to keep that division in society. So what they would say is like, we're the elites, like these plantation owners, wealthy, the elites. And they were like, but we're white. And so you guys are white too. Like, so we can't enslave you, but you're not going to be one of us. So we're both white, but you're not an elite and you're not a slave. you're like the peasantry, you know what I mean? So like basically it was just a way of saying like you guys are both poor, but because you're white, you're better than those black people. And so that's like where it all came from. So it's kind of like I don't want to say I'm white anymore, you know, because I'm like I don't want to be part of that demographic.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like it gets real confusing, especially like nowadays with like immigration and how much more aware of it we are, and like you know how much more international just everything is. Well, what's the guy's name? Khabib Nurmagomedov, right? Like by American standards, like if you just looked at him, like that's a white guy, but like no, he's a Russian. He's a Muslim. He barely speaks English. Like he's not really white, is he? But like we're supposed to call him white because we're in America. That's a unique thing to us. Well, it became worldwide, but yeah. So like that, it's just kind of yeah, it's that'll wreck your whole worldview. You know, you start thinking in terms like that.
No, I like that you brought that up. I've never considered the things that you just kind of blew my mind right there. You know,
Yeah, and like
how we conceptualize that as it has this historical root, but it makes no sense whatsoever in today's society. I was just listening to another podcast today about aliens and human relation to extraterrestrials, and how why would any extraterrestrial want to come down and allow us into their intergalactic unified forum if we're still fighting each other over these stupid race type issues, and we're not like this unified culture that they would only let in these unified cultures, which got me thinking about our conversation here. Like we're so still so stuck in these benign racial divisions, and it's possibly preventing our entry into the galactic Federation. God damn it! And
yeah,
you know,
and that like they've had all those UFO sightings they just released.
right.
So like they're here, they're waiting for us. They're just like, come on, guys, let's move it ahead. You guys have had thousands of years. Let's get this show on the road here.
Yeah, totally. No, I haven't thought about that these days. So if you don't identify as being white, and I'm starting to think I don't want to identify as white either, but I also don't want to identify as an elite. I don't think that that's my position in society right now either. So how do you identify when people would ask you that? And what would you answer?
Well, I think I would say white out of like responsibility, because you know like I've definitely benefited from white privilege. Although I've definitely seen like especially in Fort Collins, like there is a definite like division between like it would be a good way. You didn't go to high school here, did you?
I did. I went to high school in Loveland.
Oh, well, so I guess in Loveland too. But like here, like you know, there was like the rich schools and then like the poorer high schools, and like that's a good like example of like the white kids, and then like the people that got to be like they get to call themselves white but are not really white, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and don't kind of belong in the white culture. You know what I mean? And yeah, and it got me thinking. Like something I honestly remember saying was like we were talking about like ancestry, and it said like when I was in my teenage years, and I would say like I don't care like we'd be like we're Irish and German and trying to figure out like you know all the different ethnicities and backgrounds and heritage and all that stuff, and I'm like I don't care, like I'm American now, I'm white, whatever. But now I'm like no, I take that back. Like I don't want to be a part of like white America anymore. I want to like what were my Irish ancestors all about? What were my German ancestors all about? You know, like I want to be a part of that culture now. Go back to the homeland.
Yeah, totally. Most of my background I would have to admit I'm pretty much totally white in my background. Irish, English, kind of came from the Vikings, that kind of background, and Scandinavia, things like that. And but I've tried to, and I explore some of those things, and some of the mythology of Scandinavia is fascinating to me. I love those stories. I connect with those stories. When I hear thunder and lightning outside, I think of those mythologies all the time. But for me, it's like I can choose to engage pieces of my ancestry, and I can choose to reject other pieces of American society, I guess, that I would fit into, just by default. I can reject those pieces too, but I can also sort of have the freedom to pick and choose like an ideology or a belief system that is completely not in my own lineage or heritage, right? So I prefer Buddhism. I prefer Tibetan Buddhism. I engage a lot of like Eastern mysticism into my practices, and shamanic practices from all over the world, and ideologies. And so I also feel like connected to a lot of those things too. You know what I mean? That are not necessarily in my ethnicity, but probably still in my DNA somehow.
Yeah. Well, it was a lot. I'm trying to remember. I had something. Oh, you were saying like earlier. I was thinking when you were talking about lightning and thunder, like the stories. I'm like, do I believe it's Thor? No. But do I know it isn't?
No.
I don't. I don't know it isn't. Like it could be. Very like in sheer sciences, they explain like lightning comes when this and this and this happens, right? But it's like, when did that happen? Like, how does that happen? Like, we don't know all the way down. And the way I always feel about science and like aliens and all this other stuff is like, they always say like, well, you need water to survive, right? But if they go and find this life form that survives without water, all of a sudden, like, okay, so some forms of life can live without water. And so it's like every time I say like, aliens couldn't travel here that fast because like this, that, and the other thing, and like the nearest planet is this so far away. And it's like, unless they come down, it's like, no, this is how we traveled that far that fast. And then it's like all of a sudden it's like, oh well, I guess science changed again. And I was just watching The Universe on Netflix, and they're talking about Jupiter, I think Jupiter, and it's like a gas giant. And they said if you tried to step on Jupiter's surface, you would just fall right into it. And I'm like, do we know that for sure though? Like, has anybody tried stepping on it? No.
Dude, I would love to see somebody try to step on Jupiter.
Yeah, I would feel terrible if they then died and like they did it at my like I was like, yeah, do it, and then they died. I'm like, well, but at least they died in the name of science or something, you know?
Yeah.
I got that.
No, I love that about science, and that's also super frustrating about science, is that it's ever changing. And what's frustrating is when people get locked into static science, science that just stops in one particular place and doesn't progress further in someone's thinking. That's really frustrating.
Yeah. And it's like, can you prove that it's not like, magic? I don't think you can.
No.
Also, I think that our idea of like, what if like our standards for magic just got too high, Like, because I was just thinking, if you were to go back in time and tell somebody like you could have a face-to-face conversation with somebody on the other side of the planet through this little like box you hold in your hand, they'd be like, well, yeah, it's magic. Don't be an idiot. Like, of course that's magic. Well, it's like in like, do you like Lord of the Rings?
Yeah, I've seen it.
Remember like the Palantir, and they could like you could see Sauron in it. They were like, that would be magic. And like, we do that. We're literally doing this right now, looking into our Palantirs. But like, so we say like, yeah, you and I are looking into our Palantirs, and like, and somebody would say like, I would say like, we're performing magic right now, right? And then somebody would say, well, it's not magic. It's just like they send these codes into like this wire, and then it shoots up to a satellite and sends it to another satellite and sends it back to him, and like that's how it happens. It's not magic. I'm like, well, just because we can say like that's how it happens, like
doesn't mean it's not magic.
Yeah. It's like if like I can explain how like the fireball came out of Gandalf's staff, like it's not less magic. He still shot a fireball, It's just well, now I know how to explain it.
Yeah, man, you make really good points. I feel like what we're doing in every moment of our existence is magic,
Right.
in my opinion, and how I think about consciousness and this 3D reality outside of ourselves is that it's a projection. It's something that we've created, either individually and collectively, both. But it's a projection of how we want to represent the universe in these various patterns. I don't know where I was going with that.
Well, life is kind of magic.
So magic, right? So that in and of itself is magic, right? That we're creating just how the body works. We know how it works. We know how we take in light and we make form in front of us, and our brain makes up 80% of our visual field, makes it up as a because it's not actually there all the time, and quantum physics and all these things, all this is magic still, even though we have an explanation for it.
Yeah.
But you don't have to. I want to hold on to that feeling of mysticism in all of it, right? Like that's an important feature in a lot of these things we're talking about. And when you get rid of that, it just becomes like stale and boring. I want to be able to imagine that we don't know 99.9% of information out there.
Yeah. And like what's the like we like to think of ourselves at like a kind of like a technological peak, and like the way that we say like we use technology too much, so we've kind of like hit our maximum, or like we need to like start dialing back on technology. So, and like how many times in history did people think they were at the technological peak and like they had no idea what was coming? So like what if we think now we're like, we got computers, things can't get any better from here, and like really just can't conceptualize it yet because like we really have no idea of what's going to happen. Like could you imagine being like, and I was just thinking about this because I like watching like just highlights from like I really like watching like hockey highlights, and see that's what I feel like I feel good about myself in that, like I feel like I'm grateful enough, you know what I mean? Because it's like I always think about it, like I always feel a little bit guilty sometimes, like YouTubing like the exact thing or like event I want to see, like I'd be like I literally be like fourth round Ali versus Liston. Oh wait, and I'll be like, I want to watch that round again, and I'm like, man, I can't believe
reality.
Yeah, and then like I was watching like these hockey highlights, and it hit me like before, like in the time before photography, it was you either saw the thing happen, or like you had no, like that was it. Like you were either there or that's it. Like you didn't experience it. You know what I mean? You have no idea what it looked like. You have no idea what happened. And nowadays you can be like, we can review it, And I always think about like that, like if it's unfair to judge, because I always like, well, not anymore, but I used to really be into like when they would rank like the greatest athletes of all time and all that stuff, or like the best, or like right now, like best like boxers of all time, right? I don't think it's fair to compare to like people pre-video with people now, because like they couldn't review video. They had to guess like what somebody was going to do and like go off like what they could see. Like if you went to like this guy, all this person's fights, you could say like, I remember watching that he would throw his hooks like this, you know what I mean? But then but nowadays you can be like, this guy throws his hook like this. It'd be a little bit better if instead you did like, you threw it like this instead of like that or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
It's like that's nobody else had that privilege. And like nowadays, like it's a little unfair to compare like athletes from now to then. And I think maybe in that way, like it's unfair to judge artists in that way too. Like they didn't have as much material to review as we did, you know?
Why do you think people look down on the idea of magic? Where, we're talking about, stereotypical forms of magic, but also that, everything that we're doing in our technological world is magic. The reality itself is magic. So why this negative opinion still of magic in our culture? Why do you think? And yet we flock to the movies to be able to see it on the big screen,
Yeah.
And then in our everyday life, we're like, fuck magic.
Yeah.
Can't prove it. Fuck that.
Yeah, like I'll make fun of you if you like start talking about magic. Like I'll think you're look down upon you. I think it's because America is like where magic came to die, because like they say like everybody come here from like every background, right? But what they didn't say is like when you get here, like 86 the backgrounds and get to work. Like you can be a farmer or like a factory worker and that's it. And like I know like you don't get to bring like all your religions, you get this like one religion, or you can combine a bunch into and like forget about your culture. Like I said, like it doesn't matter that you're like Slovenian, you're a white dude now, your name's Johnson, like go plow the fucking fields, And so like I think it's against like the American agenda to believe in magic. You know what I mean? Like
yeah, because working hard is our agenda, not creating out of thin air.
yeah, and it's I think it's to be like don't get excited like you're not special, like you're a farmer like everybody else, like yeah, and then like you guys all consume the same, like you're supposed to all eat the same stuff and want to dress the same and do all the same stuff because it's what we sell, and it's American for you to do this. It's American for you to be the way we prescribe. And if you love freedom, then you'll be like behave the way we say. And I think that like if you were to like to believe that like you do have that power, like you have the power of Merlin because you have an iPhone, like all of a sudden like, well, maybe you're more than just a farmer, maybe you're more than just a factory worker. And I think they're like, oh no, you're just a peasant, get back to work. Like we're the special ones because we have shitloads of money. We were here first.
That doesn't sit well. Anytime we bring up like I don't know, and this is a part of it, right? This is a part of talking about these kind of things, is sometimes feeling uncomfortable, sometimes feeling like disconnected from the original ideologies that created these circumstances, and yet still being considered a part of that grouping of people. You know what I mean?
I'm saying this is like every day for me now, being an ethnic studies major. So it's like every day I learn something new. I'm like, God damn it.
Yeah, me too. We're learning I'm learning a lot about equity and equality and white privilege and white male oppression and all this stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, like these are the people that I'm directly tied to, but I don't feel connected to them.
No.
I feel connected to more ancient ancestors that were collectivists, that were worked together in small communities and helped each other out, no matter what you looked like or had preferences for. Just doesn't sit well. But it's definitely for you and I, well, for me anyway, it's an amazing transformative adventure to like go into these kind of classes and sit with that and sit with the readings that you're reading that are pointing fingers at right at you.
Yeah. Well, and here's the the thing it changed me too is because like I grew up with like friends of every like ethnicity. Like I had black friends, I had like Latinx friends. It wasn't weird to me, and so like I still have that same mentality, but it's just like now I can't help but think that like I don't see this person as a black person, but other people do, and they have to deal with that, you know. And I'm just like, that damn, that like that's terrible. Like I gotta like try to do something about that, you know. That's kind of like what my like the motivation behind majoring in ethnic studies was. Is it was like, yeah, I don't feel that way. Like I never felt like a racist, and it's like that's cool, but like now I need to do something about that because racism is really like prevalent. It's kind of like what the country was built on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like
Yeah.
I gotta help. I can't just like stand by anymore. I gotta throw my hat in the ring.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm starting to see it now more as like a responsibility. Like it was my people technically who, you know, who did this, who created this country the way it is today, and they can't undo it because they're long gone, you know.
Yeah.
But and I also acknowledge that, you know, white privilege still does exist, and I certainly unknowingly most of the time have probably taken advantage of that many times in my life, and I have to acknowledge that. But you're right. From this place, what can I do to help move things forward? You know, so and that's a question I still struggle with and I still wrestle with, because I also don't want to do anything that's not my place to do. You know, so for you, you know, where do you find yourself with that question? How do you want to, or how do you feel comfortable stepping forward and trying to help change people's thinking around this in our country?
Yeah. Well, the thing that I think, and mind you, I've only been at this for 2 semesters now, so I'm still like building this, like on my ideas and all stuff. But I think what the most important thing right now is I think that we need to be a lot more patient with people, for starters. Like I'm kind of opposed to like the way people go after like celebrities and stuff on Twitter, because they'll be like dropping these concepts on people that like I want to like I want to ask those people like, are you tell me that you didn't just learn this concept like 6 months ago, and now you're like laying on this person like not only should they know this concept, but they have like a responsibility to it, and they're a bad person for not fulfilling it.
Mm-hmm.
When it's like, you know, I've realized that because like I've had that same kind of like passion, because like, you know, when you read something like about like the injustices and like the atrocities and all stuff, like you get like this resentfulness, and you want to be like, you want to hit back at like racists and white privilege and white power structures and all that stuff. But then like it hits me again, I'm like, I just learned this at 30. Like, so for 30 years, like I didn't feel this way. So to expect somebody else to like not only like understand the same concept, but to like understand why I'm like coming at them and like attacking them is really unfair. And I think that's kind of like what drove like the alt-right kind of like white power like union there, like because you know how they had like the neo-Nazis and the alt-right. I don't know if they're still like in cahoots, but like for a while there they were like working together, and I think that's what drove it. Is like people like they wanted to be part of it, like a tolerant culture, but like once they like dipped their toe into this tolerant culture or culture of tolerance, they got like they saw like this like immediate backlash people were getting, like this like angry like vitriol. It's like you're participating in this white power structure, and you're by you making this commercial and you know stuff. And so they're like, I can't be a part of that culture because I don't want to be attacked, so I'm going to go find where I am comfortable. And it just so happens that I share a lot of values with these people. And then you come to find out they're neo-Nazis, and you're like, well, I'm not a neo-Nazi, but like I wanted to be. And so I think that like needs to be more like patience and tolerance, and like there definitely needs to be room for people to accept responsibility and change. You know, like I thought of this example. We were talking about that I can't remember her name now, but the little girl that was in the 50s at Little Rock, and they had to be escorted in by the National Guard to school, and they were talking about, like, you know, it was all those really famous pictures of like the white ladies like following and like screaming mean shit at them, and then I was in a small group and we were talking about one of the ladies in the pictures. It was like, saw that, like, herself in the picture, like did a total 180 and like is now like a advocate for racial equality and all that stuff. And they were like, the people in the group, I was like, well, now she is, and now she's trying to get it. And I'm like, if we're not going to allow people to like realize their mistakes and change, like, then we're just sitting here drawing battle lines. We're just saying that, like, okay, so we're on this side, you're on that side, let's go. Like, we're at war. And when in fact it's supposed to, like, I think that a lot of people lose the true, like, meaning of arguing and debating. Like, you're not trying to prove the other person wrong, you're trying to win them to your side, you know. And I think a lot of times it comes with people trying to prove another person wrong, like they're trying to win the debate rather than trying to like win over the person, you know. And I think that's the real goal, is you're trying to like make them see what you see, you know. And so I think that we need to like start taking that into consideration. And then I had one more. Lost my train of thought.
That was beautiful.
What's that?
That was beautiful. That was amazing how you said that.
Oh, thank you.
It reminded me of a situation I had to at school. You know, with what I would consider like a so I don't know, someone probably more progressive than me, more knowledgeable in this sphere than myself. But this COVID thing hit, right? And I found myself torn between these two camps that we were talking about, right? Like, quarantine everybody, herd mentality, but also people who are like, fuck that, like, I still need to work, like, let me go to work, let me provide for my family, I'm going to get evicted. And I found myself torn between those two, because one of my classmates said something like, if she said, I'm going to be a good citizen by staying at home and doing what I'm told, pretty much, like following the guidelines. And in my head, that just screamed like, oh my God, like, on one hand, yes, you're following the guidelines like a good citizen should, but on the other hand, like, this is America, like, good citizen is supposed to stand up for freedom and constitutional rights. And like, so my head went to like, well, I want to be a citizen and still express my freedoms, or else they're going to be taken away from me. Almost like a fear mentality. And so torn between these two, and they're competing. They're still competing, and they're competing at the national level too, among society at large. Like, do we stay quarantined, or do we go back to work? When is the time to go? And there's like this, we're not addressing the deeper question, like you said.
No. Yeah. And
boundary lines, war lines.
What's that?
We're drawing war lines, like you said.
Yeah. It's like it's not so much like, I feel like a lot of people will take those classes, because there's not a lot of ethnic studies majors. In fact, like, I remember like there was a meeting of ethnic studies majors, and like they had it catered, and I was like, that's funny, because you probably could just like taken like all 5 of our orders, because there's like 5 of us here, Mm-hmm. And so a lot of the people will be like English majors or something else, and they'll be taking this class as like an elective or something. And I feel like a lot of those people are just to be like, I can prove I'm not racist because I took this class, and this gives me like the agency to tell you you are racist, and like we're opposing one another now. Like, you're on the wrong side of it, and I'm on the right side.
It's like you have a badge of initiation.
Yes, yeah, like you have like whatever, like you have the reverse swastika now, like as your logo, like whatever the verse of that is, like I'm definitely not a Nazi, but you're a dick.
Yeah, dude, I found that that same feeling too. This year I was exposed to. I'd taken some women's studies classes in my undergrad and probably explored feminism back then, but not very mindfully. I think I still got an A in the course, but I don't remember it that well, honestly.
Yeah.
But where was I going with that?
Women's studies.
Yeah, no, I lost it.
Took it as an undergrad.
Oh, yeah. So I was re-examining feminism this last semester. Just read a couple articles on it as part of a class, and I found myself again torn because I agreed with parts of feminism, but I didn't agree with it to the extent that I thought would be necessary to call myself a feminist.
Yeah.
And I see these other people out here, like males too, especially calling themselves male feminists and stuff. And I don't think they know the concept of what feminism is about.
No.
And I'm not saying feminism's bad by any means. There's definitely some great progressive parts, but just like any other theory, it's flawed in many ways.
Yeah.
Just like the theories that I ascribe to too. And so that was one example of sort of like, you brought up neo-Nazism before and things like that. So that was one that I kind of had to sit back and examine my relationship with this last semester.
Yeah, and feminism is more like complex than people realize too, because it came in waves.
Mm-hmm.
There's 4 waves of like, well, they're theorized that we're in the 4th wave of feminism now, and so it was always like, what feminism was it like? How it was defined was what was necessary at the time, you know. So the first wave was the suffragettes, you know. So that was, I mean, while there was lots of women's rights issues at the time, the key point in feminism there was like, we just want the vote, like just let us vote as like human beings, you know. And then like the second wave came around in the 50s, and it was in response to like the post-war modernist culture, you know. Then 70s was like the Roe v. Wade and the birthrights and the equal pay and all that stuff. And then we're doing it like, then there was a third wave that was the equal pay. So it's kind of like, it was whatever, like it was a response to the time, you know. So it's hard to say like feminism is one thing, because it was depends on which area you're talking about and who you're talking about. But really, like the broad concept though is like we have a male dominated culture, and this is like a way of like uniting and empowering women. And so I think that you're right. I'm in the camp where it's like I support feminism. I agree with feminism, but I don't think I can call myself a feminist, because it's like feminism was created like for people that like, I don't know, like I don't say not that my people oppress, you know what I mean? So it's like I can't be part of the club that like people who look like me create, like made a need for, you know?
Yeah.
And it's not for me to define, like it's that's for women to get together and be like, what do we need? Like what's the issues we can all agree on here, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the major limitation that I saw in feminism is that, and then I was later told that this is sort of just implied in feminism, but that it's not explicitly stated beyond, you know, the male-female construct, right? And in this emerging culture now, with all sorts of people who identify in all sorts of ways, like, and even, you know, if we have aliens come down, right, they're going to be androgynous most likely, and we're going to have to, so how do we apply feminism, which, you know, is limited even in its name, right, with feminine in there, right? If we want it to be even more inclusive, which what I think is at the core of feminism is all inclusiveness, then you know, it's limited in that way. in that. I think it gets bogged down in male female.
Yeah. Yeah. And see that, and like, this is more, I think, and like, this is again why like I'm studying, like I still like, I don't feel comfortable in like putting out like what I think the solution is or anything, because I
Sure.
feel like there's a lot more to learn. And then, and this is more of why I think that like there needs to be more of like a kind of a gentle approach from people like me to people that like are still learning about all these topics, is because like if I were to say that like the key of feminism is to like push back against the patriarchy, well, like what happens there is like most people hear patriarchy and will be like, oh, you mean men? And it's like, no. Like, so like you gotta
The
pause and be
patriarchy.
like, let me explain patriarchy to you. And see, that's why I think it's like it's dangerous, like these Twitter beefs. So you see people, I'm like, you gotta understand, like this is complicated. And like if you sat there and explained to somebody all of these topics, like they would be against, I think most everybody would be against patriarchy, because like when they're like saying they're like they hate the government, I'm like, what you actually are trying to say is you hate patriarchy. Like, and that when I say that, people are gonna like, a person who's not familiar with any of these topics is probably gonna be like you think like politicians are like my dad, or like we're all this, like this is all men. It's like, no, trust me, it's like it's not what you think it is. It's like all the reasons you as a white man are like angry at the world is because like patriarchy. You know what I mean? Like you agree with feminists. Trust me, you don't realize it yet, but like you do.
Yeah, that's
The thing that I kept realizing until that like kept hitting me is like, I mean, I'm a total nerd. Like I have a Star Wars tattoo, you know, like I love all these things. And like the thing that I kept being like, that was like, this is like why part of why I love it is I was like, these people are like the Rebel Alliance, you know what I mean? Like they're fighting like the evil empire and like the Rebel Alliance. Like these people are fucking cool. Like I like these people. I wish I could get to know some of these people. Like this is like Han Solo and Chewbacca right here.
Yeah, that's a great metaphor. I want to take it one step further and say that, the evil empire is the patriarchy, the global patriarchy influence. And these rebels, we're all rebels, right? Feminists are rebels. Buddhists are rebels. Anybody that fights against the patriarchy is a rebel. But in those movies, like, in order to defeat that empire, they needed to come together in the rebel alliance, right? The alliance between them was essential in bringing them down, and that's the piece that we need to move forward in our evolution, hopefully in our lifetime, to this place where we can become this alliance against the patriarchy, bring it down, and then start anew, start something that works, that actually works, hopefully.
Yeah. And this is like something that I really hit it, I could relate to, I guess you could say, is like I grew up poor. Like I lived in trailer parks, apartments. Like I was a poor kid, right? And I went to like the second richest high school in town, which is still like, it was pretty, like they were rich kids. Like I don't want to say it on here, but like there's a car dealership, a famous car dealership here in town, and like the name of the car dealership, I knew like the kid with that name. Like they were rich kids, right? And it's like I felt like an outsider there, and not like an outsider. Like I mean, like I just like did not belong in that high school, you know. And so like so I wasn't friends with any of them. Like I didn't enjoy going to class. Them like felt like an outcast. And like in reading this out, like in all these studies, I'm not that I'm trying to like discount or like disregard like the concepts of white privilege and like racism and all those things, but it's like if I could show like all these people like how similar the way you feel that you've been treated by like the world and the society and the government, and the way like minorities and others, cultural others feel, like you'd be like, wait a minute, I think we're all on the same side. Like we're against like the elite and the patriarchy. Like we're like if we all got together, it's kind of like, I feel like if you were to take like an individual person and you were to say like, does like universal healthcare make sense to you? They'd be like, yes. But when you say like, okay, now we're gonna do it for the whole country, it's like, oh wait, no, hold on, that's a bad idea, you know?
Yeah. Um, I want to be respectful of your time too, because I know we've gone over a little bit. And I didn't even get to ask you the only real scripted question that I have for this show, which is usually the first question, but I think it's going to be the last question for us today, um, which is the show's called Conversations with the Mind. And I want to know, for you, how does that phrase land and what does that mean to you from your own perspective? Conversations with the Mind.
Conversations with the mind. I would say it's to me it's kind of like a study of the things I can't define, but I know that I feel, you know? So it's trying to grapple with that, like, how do I explain that? Like there's things that I don't understand that maybe your mind can help my mind understand, you know?
Yeah, that's been blessed for not only the conversation we have with ourselves between the known and the unknown and walking that tightrope, but also the conversations that we have with each other and shared minds. And, you know, I like to say that, this podcast sort of represents like a puzzle. It's an 8 billion piece puzzle, and each guest that I have onto the show brings another piece to that larger picture. And when we put together all of these pieces in one place, then we can start to see a larger picture emerge.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that was well reflected in what you had to say. So, Colby, I want to say thanks again for coming on. That it was short notice, but I'm glad that you wanted to do this, man. This was really fun.
It's fun. Yeah, I enjoyed it. We'll have to do round 2 soon.
Yeah, I'd love to. Let's definitely do this. Did you say your dad was a politician?
No.
Okay, I'm glad you said that. I was gonna say, like, we have to unpack that, but
No.
no. But we started going down a bit of another rabbit hole that I love to talk about with you, which is politics and how it fits in sort of like this bipartisan cultural framework that we have, and how we can move beyond that. And yeah, we got some good talks coming.
Yeah, this will be fun. I'm excited. Well, thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.
All right, see ya.
Conversations with the Mind podcast is sponsored by mindops.com. You can find us at www.mind-ops.com. We're an eclectic counseling company providing mental health and mental performance services to individuals, small and large groups, teams, businesses, military, through face-to-face sessions or at a distance using phone or confidential video chat apps. We bring a unique Buddhist Western lens and specialize in general psychotherapy for all mental difficulties, sport and performance psychology for performance enhancement, addiction counseling for any maladaptive or destructive habits, and psychedelic integration therapy to make the most from your visionary medicine work. We are available as well for corporate workshops to address the needs of your employees' wellness.